Welcome to second semester of English 11 Honors, and we are going to be working on writing your dystopian fiction short story this week. But today, you're still going to be kind of in a planning phase, and so we want to talk about some additional things. Like we've talked about dystopian fiction, looked at some of the characteristics, but we also want to look at some narrative techniques today. But just as a review, remember that dystopian authors are looking at some problem or issue in their world and then enlarging it or magnifying it to draw attention for the reader that it is a problem. You are going to be telling us your story in 2 to 3 pages. It can be a little longer if you want it to be, but if you, like some of your plot diagrams that I saw from last week, that would take a lot longer than 2 to 3 pages. So you need to narrow in on what part of your story do you really want to tell. So it can be part of a larger story, but you need to focus in. You just need to make sure that the beginning of your story introduces the setting and the protagonist so that we understand what's going on. Okay, and it also has to include a privacy issue. So for the author's theme last week, you were supposed to give me a privacy theme. You can have other themes to your story, and the privacy one may not be like the main point, but part of our summative assessment for the district, for this unit, our essential question is, what is the relationship between privacy, freedom, and security? So you have to highlight some privacy issue. So it can be the person's physical privacy or digital privacy, but you have to talk about how is your protagonist, your main character, how is their privacy being infringed upon in some way? Okay, how is their privacy being taken advantage of? Are they being watched in some way, shape, or form? Is their information being hacked into? So it does not have to be from technology per se. I mean, it could be like somebody's physically watching them, but how are they losing their privacy in some way? Okay. Then narrative techniques. So narrative is just a story. Okay, so you are storytelling in this dystopian short story. So what are some things that you need to think about? Well, pacing has to do with time. So like I said before, you can be telling us a piece of a larger story, but you have to figure out how you're going to do that. So pacing has to do with manipulation of time and how quickly or slowly the action unfolds. So you don't have a lot of space, page-wise, to get to the action. So some of you might need to get to the action right away. I mean, you think about stories that you know, like if the author waits too long for the action to start, you might get bored. So sometimes the action starts on the first page. Sometimes you have to build into that, like an author wants more character development first. So you have to choose that for yourself as well. And what is your main aim? Is your aim to develop the plot or to develop the characters? I mean, obviously you have to develop your plot some. There has to be some kind of conflict or else the story is usually boring. So it doesn't have to be like action fighting conflict. It can be, conflict between people, can be internal conflict, but you have to create some sort of conflict. So for this, again, if you're telling us a piece of a bigger story, you need to figure out how you're going to do that. You can use flashback, okay? You can use lots of different things that you want to do, but as far as the time goes, I want you to think about, okay, so I'm telling, this story has been happening, but I'm getting to the climax and then going to finish it up. Or I'm starting at the beginning of the story and I'm going to end on a cliffhanger. Okay, and I told you that that's fine. You can end your story on a cliffhanger. It doesn't have to get resolved all the way, but you have to have built enough where we understand what's going on and it makes sense where you're stopping. Okay, if you haven't really told us your privacy theme or anything like that, when you stop at the cliffhanger, that's not going to be very successful for your short story. So think about how you want to manage and manipulate the time in your story. Summary versus scene, okay? So the most important, highest action, you're going to want to create a scene for that. You don't want just to summarize and say, this happened, okay? That's where you're going to probably want to create a scene where there is actually dialogue and that we can visualize as the reader what's happening, not just you summarizing, okay? So crisis moments can't be summarized. which leads us to dialogue, just a conversation between two or more characters. When should you use it? I can tell you when you shouldn't use it. If they're just going to say, hi, hello, how are you? That is not a good purpose of dialogue, okay? We want it to be something that's showing versus telling, okay? If this is a heated argument between two of your characters or like some crisis moment where they're having to make this huge decision, you want to show that versus saying the character had to make this hard decision. Like, help us to see what's happening there. It helps provide realism. You know, you're developing your characters, helps us see the tone that those characters are using, their motivation. Obviously, it's advancing your plot, but you want to be strategic where you're using dialogue. You have to use dialogue somewhere. Then description, okay? This is creative writing in your short story. You want it to be exciting. You want us to be able to visualize what's happening. So you want to use vivid adjectives, okay? Not just it was big, tall, red, whatever you're describing, okay? You want to use vivid adjectives and action verbs, okay? We want to avoid as much as we can is, are, was, were, be. You want to avoid those being verbs, okay, and get us some more, something more exciting, okay? He didn't just run, he sprinted, okay? Or, he just didn't walk, he sauntered, or, he put his swag on. Whatever you want to do, guys, but make it more interesting than, just the basic thing. And obviously, you're going to get to go back and revise, so, the first time through, you don't have to have the most exciting words, but as you're writing, try in that moment to really visualize what's happening to this character. And, even in your first draft, try to use those descriptive words. And then finally, sensory language. So things that appeal to your audience's five senses. So help us to, again, visualize what's happening. What can we see in the space, in the setting? Because you are creating a setting of some kind. And the more, you don't want it to be too detailed, but you want it to have some detail where we can imagine what's happening. Okay, and obviously that you're determining how important your setting is. Okay, but like what the character looks like. If you can show us, what's the sounds of what's happening. So definitely sight and sound, smell, touch, taste, those are definitely harder. But if that's part of your story, then you want to use that as well. So some kind of sensory language. So all of those different things are part of the scoring guide. And so you want to be able to hit each of these things. All right, so your planning sheet for today talks about some of the things you did for brainstorming last week. And if you are just new to our class, you're going to be fine still. Don't panic if you didn't do brainstorming before. Really, the brainstorming was who's your main character, the protagonist, who's the antagonist, so who's against your character. That can be a human or it doesn't have to be a human. Setting, the time and place, okay, and then that privacy-related theme, and then the things that we just talked about today. So if you have any questions, send me an email. I'd be happy to help you. But that's what you're doing today is planning, and you need to have that ready to go by Tuesday night. So I would like to look at those on Wednesday, and you can start into your first draft after that. Your first draft is due Friday night by midnight. All right, guys, have a great day.